In 1929, a widow in rural Tennessee kept 4 children fed, clothed, and warm on $9 a month. Not $9 a day, $9 for the entire month. And she did it with knowledge her neighbors shared freely, knowledge that disappeared the moment supermarkets made it unnecessary, and knowledge that the companies who replaced it have spent decades making sure never came back. What she knew, an average American family today does not. Number 6 on this list kept a single chicken feeding a family for 11 straight days. Number 13 produces something that sells for $14 at farmers markets today, and Depression families made it every week from scraps they were already throwing away. And the trick at number 1 was considered so outdated by the 1960s that home economics textbooks stopped teaching it entirely. Today, emergency preparedness experts call it one of the most valuable household skills a family can have. These 22 secrets kept ordinary Americans alive through the longest economic collapse in modern history. They survived not because they had more, but because they knew how to extract everything that was already there. Subscribe and watch until the end, because the last one changes how you think about everything that came before it. Number 22. The ash bucket. Every Depression fireplace had a covered metal bucket beside it, and it was never emptied into the trash. Wood ash was one of the most useful substances in the house. Mixed with water, it became lye, the base ingredient for homemade soap. Sprinkled directly in the garden, it added potassium and calcium to soil that grew food the family depended on. Packed around the base of fruit trees, it kept pests away without spending a cent. A single winter's worth of fireplace ash handled what modern households split across fertilizer bags, pesticide sprays, and soap products that together cost hundreds of dollars a year. The raw material was free. It was already being produced. Most families today bag it and put it at the curb. Number 21. Milk that stretched 3 ways. Fresh milk in 1932 cost about 14 cents a quart, and Depression families used every drop of it in 3 separate passes. The first pour went to drinking. What remained after a day sat covered on the counter, and as it soured, the curds separated from the whey. The curds were pressed through cloth and salted to make soft farmer's cheese, rich enough to spread on bread or crumble into cooked grains. The leftover whey, thin and slightly tart, went into bread dough in place of water, adding protein and producing a softer, longer-lasting loaf. Nothing from that original quart was wasted. Modern households pour soured milk down the drain because they were taught it was ruined. It was not ruined. It had simply moved to its next use. Number 20. The salt box. Before refrigerators, salt was a preservation technology, not just a seasoning. A Depression family kept a wooden box of coarse salt near the back door, and everything that needed to last went in or under it at some point. Green beans were layered with salt in crocks and stored all winter. Cucumbers submerged in brine became pickles that lasted until spring. Slabs of pork packed in salt hung in the cellar for months. Salt curing required no electricity, no equipment beyond a container, and the salt itself lasted indefinitely. A 5-pound bag cost 8 cents in 1933. Modern households buy vacuum-sealed packaging, refrigeration, and frozen storage to do what a 5-pound bag of salt once handled at a fraction of the cost. Number 19. Darned wool. A pair of wool socks in the Depression cost 30 cents, which was genuinely unaffordable when the weekly food budget for a family might be $2 total. Socks were darned, worn again, darned again, and handed from one child to the next. The repair method was a wooden egg held inside the sock to create a smooth work surface. A needle wove new thread back and forth across the hole in a tight grid, creating a patch denser than the original knit. Wool repaired this way did not wear through again at the same spot. It created a reinforced section stronger than the surrounding fabric. The average American household today throws away socks with small holes because mending feels like too much effort for something that costs $3 to replace. Depression families could not think that way, and their socks lasted for years because of it. Number 18. Cornmeal as medicine. Cornmeal was cheap, shelf-stable, and used in ways that went far beyond food. A cornmeal poultice, mixed with hot water to a thick paste and wrapped in cloth, was applied to deep splinters and minor infections to draw them out. Applied to bee stings and ant bites, it absorbed moisture and reduced swelling. Dry cornmeal dusted on skin rashes and chafed areas absorbed irritants and provided a mild barrier. A 50-pound sack cost around $1 in 1933 and lasted months. It fed the family, treated minor injuries, and managed skin conditions that would otherwise have required a doctor visit most families could not afford. The active component in the poultice is still the basis of certain commercial drawing salves sold today for $12 a tin. Number 17. The wax seal. Depression kitchens sealed everything they wanted to keep. Melted paraffin wax poured over the top of a jar of jam or jelly created an airtight barrier that preserved the contents for a year or longer without refrigeration. The same wax rubbed on the threads of a screw or bolt allowed it to drive cleanly into hard wood without splitting. Rubbed along a drawer runner, it stopped sticking without oil or silicone spray. Applied the leather shoe uppers, it repelled water and extended the life of shoes that could not be replaced. One block of paraffin wax cost about a nickel and served 6 or 7 different household purposes. The modern household buys canning lids, lubricant spray, drawer glide, and waterproofing conditioner separately. Depression families use the same block of wax for all of it. Number 16. The Perpetual Vinegar Mother. Apple cider vinegar during the Depression was made at home, not purchased. A glass jar with leftover apple scraps, cores, and peels was covered with water, loosely covered with cloth to allow airflow, and left on the counter for several weeks. The natural yeast fermented the sugars into alcohol, and bacteria then converted that alcohol into acetic acid. The result was genuine apple cider vinegar, produced continuously from kitchen waste. The rubbery disc that formed on the surface was the vinegar mother, and it was kept and transferred to each new batch, meaning one original batch produced vinegar indefinitely at essentially no cost. Apple cider vinegar at grocery stores today sells for $4 to $8 per bottle. Depression families made it from apple peels they were already generating while cooking. Number 15. The Haybox Cooker. Fuel for cooking was not free or unlimited during the Depression. Wood had to be split, coal had to be purchased. The haybox eliminated much of that cost. A wooden crate lined with several inches of tightly packed hay created an insulated chamber that retained heat well enough to finish cooking food without any additional fuel. A pot of beans brought to a full boil on the stove for 15 minutes was then sealed inside the haybox and left for 4 to 6 hours. When it came out, it was fully cooked. Stews, grains, and root vegetables all finished this way, using the heat already generated rather than requiring the stove to run for hours. Outdoor gear companies sell insulated cooking bags today for $40 that operate on the exact same principle. Depression families built the same thing from scrap wood and dried grass. Number 14. Save string. String and twine were never thrown away. Every piece of string from packages, every bit of cotton cord, every strip of cloth too small for patching went into a ball hung near the back door. Accumulated over weeks, it became usable rope for tying garden plants, bundling firewood, hanging laundry, repairing broken handles, and replacing worn leather straps. A serious Depression household maintained multiple of these balls at different thicknesses, organized by weight and purpose. The habit reflected a deeper principle. Nothing that could still perform a function was treated as waste. What looked like random string was actually an inventory of future usefulness. Modern households buy packaged twine at hardware stores while throwing away functional string from every shipment they receive. Number 13. Rendered suet candles. When store-bought candles ran out and kerosene for lamps was too expensive, Depression families made their own light. Beef suet, the hard fat around the kidneys, was rendered slowly over low heat until it turned clear and liquid. Strained through cloth to remove impurities, it was poured into tin molds or small jars around a braided cotton wick. Once cooled, it produced a functional candle that burned for hours. The suet itself often cost nothing because butchers sold it cheaply or gave it away. Beeswax candles at specialty shops today sell for $12 to $18 each. Depression families made functional lighting from fat that cost pennies and a length of cotton thread. Number 12. The onion skin broth base. Nothing from an onion went to waste in a Depression kitchen. The papery outer skins, the root end, the wilted outer layers, all of it went into a cloth bag kept hanging near the stove. Once the bag was full, the contents were simmered in water for 30 minutes and strained. What resulted was a dark amber broth with genuine depth of flavor from the quercetin and natural sugars in the skins. This became the base for soups, sauces, and cooking liquids all week. Combined with the water left from boiling vegetables, it produced a complex broth without using a single piece of food that would otherwise have been eaten. Modern households buy cartons of broth for $3 to $5. Depression families made the same thing from what they were already discarding. Number 11. The medicine cabinet from the pantry. A Depression household's pantry doubled as its pharmacy. Honey was kept not only as a sweetener, but as a wound dressing, applied directly to cuts and burns because its low moisture content and slight acidity prevented bacterial growth in ways that Depression families understood by observation without needing to know the biochemistry. Dried ginger root treated nausea and poor circulation. Garlic crushed in cloth and pressed against infected wounds drew out swelling. Plantain leaves gathered from the yard, bruised and applied directly, soothed insect stings and minor burns. These treatments appear throughout Depression-era farm diaries and home remedy notebooks precisely because doctor visits cost money. Most of the active compounds in those remedies are now isolated, synthesized, and sold as pharmaceutical products. The original sources grew in the yard or sat in the pantry and cost nothing. Number 10. Whole grain wheat storage. Families who could afford it bought wheat berries by the 50-pound sack and stored the grain whole rather than as flour. This was not accidental. Flour goes rancid within weeks once milled because the oils in the germ begin to oxidize once the protective bran is broken. Whole wheat berries, stored in sealed tins or crocks in a cool cellar, lasted years without spoiling. A hand-cranked grain mill allowed families to grind exactly what they needed each time, producing fresh flour with full nutritional value at the moment of use. Commercially milled flour was shelf-stabilized by removing the germ entirely, stripping the most nutritious portion of the grain to extend the product's shelf life. Depression families with stored wheat berries ate more nutrition per loaf than anyone buying flour from a store today. Number 9. The dye pot. Clothing that faded or stained beyond cleaning was not discarded, it was dyed. Depression families gathered plant materials that had been used as dyes for generations. Black walnut hulls produced a deep brown that was permanent and required no mordant to fix. Onion skins boiled in water gave wool and cotton a rich golden yellow. Pokeweed berries created purple tones. Goldenrod flowers yielded a lasting warm yellow. The dyeing process required only a large pot, the plant material, and the fabric. A garment that looked worn out and disreputable emerged from the dye pot looking intentional and renewed. Depression families understood something about clothing that the modern fast fashion industry has worked hard to make people forget. Color is not a fixed property of a garment. It can always be changed. Number 8. The sand battery. Heating a home through a Depression winter without running the furnace all night required a specific strategy. Large smooth stones or bricks were placed near the fire or on top of the wood stove during the evening hours, absorbing heat steadily for 2 to 3 hours. Wrapped tightly in several layers of cloth, they were then carried to bedrooms and placed under blankets or at the foot of the bed. A stone that had been heated for 3 hours retained enough warmth to keep a bed comfortable for 4 to 5 hours. The same principle applied to tightly sealed metal containers filled with dry sand, which held heat even longer. This was not improvisation. It was a technique passed down through generations, documented in household management guides from the 1800s, used through the entire Depression as fuel costs made nighttime heating unaffordable for most families. Number 7. Soap nuts and natural cleaners. When commercial soap and cleaning products ran short, Depression households turned to materials that had been cleaning clothes and surfaces for centuries before soap companies existed. Soap nuts, the dried fruit of the sapindus tree, contain saponins that foam and lift oils from fabric when agitated in warm water. They were available cheaply through general stores in rural areas. Soapwort, a common garden plant, produced the same foaming compounds when boiled. For surfaces, a mixture of washing soda, which cost pennies per pound, dissolved grease and sanitized countertops without any commercial cleaner. These alternatives did not underperform. They cleaned effectively. They simply did not come in a branded bottle with a marketing budget behind them. Natural cleaning products using the same soapberry compounds now sell for premium prices at specialty stores. Depression families bought the raw material for almost nothing. Number 6. The whole chicken system. A chicken purchased during the Depression fed a family not once, but across 11 separate uses. Day 1, the bird was roasted. The remaining carcass went into a pot of cold water overnight, drawing out gelatin and flavor. Day 2, the stock was finished with root vegetables and served as soup with the picked over meat. Day 3, the thickened, cooled stock was used as a gravy base. The feet, often discarded today, were simmered separately for several more hours, producing a gelatin-rich broth valued specifically for healing and recovery in Depression-era household medicine books. The liver was cooked separately with onion the first day. The gizzard and heart were added to the stock. The rendered fat from around the cavity went into the drippings jar. A single chicken supported nearly 2 weeks of meals, condiments, and cooking fat for a family that understood there was no part of it that did not have further use. Number 5. The Sleeping Porch. Summer in the South and Midwest without air conditioning meant dangerous heat inside wood frame houses during the 1930s. Depression families built or repurposed sleeping porches, covered outdoor structures with screens that allowed airflow while keeping insects out. Strategic window placement created cross-ventilation that lowered indoor temperatures by 10 to 15 degrees without electricity. Heavy cotton curtains were wet down and hung across doorways, and the evaporation of the water drew heat from the air passing through them, a cooling method that worked on the same principle as modern evaporative coolers, which are themselves marketed as a fraction of the cost of central air conditioning. Depression families built the same effect with wet cloth and airflow. The physics have not changed. Only the price of the equipment sold to replicate them has. Number 4. Blacksmithing and Tin Repair. Objects made of metal during the Depression were repaired, not replaced. A cracked cast iron pan was repaired by a traveling tinker or by the householder using a technique called cold welding with iron wire. A bent plow blade was straightened at the local blacksmith for a few cents. Holes in tin pots were patched with small discs of tin soldered in place. The tools required for basic metal repair were simple and inexpensive to own. The knowledge of how to use them was considered a basic household competency, the way knowing how to change a tire is considered basic today. When a pan cracked or a pot developed a hole, the Depression family saw a repair problem. The modern household sees a replacement purchase. That shift in perception has cost the average American household an estimated several $100s per year in objects discarded while still functionally repairable. Number 3. The Seed Library. Depression farm families did not buy seeds every spring, they maintained them. At the end of each growing season, the best specimens from each crop were selected, allowed to fully ripen and dry on the plant, and then carefully stored in labeled paper envelopes kept in a cool, dry box through the winter. Tomatoes, beans, squash, corn, and greens were all saved this way. Families exchanged seeds with neighbors, building diversity into their personal libraries to protect against disease and weather variation. A family with a well-maintained seed library was insulated from price increases, supply shortages, and the failure of any single variety in a difficult year. Modern households buy fresh seed packets each spring for $2 to $4 each. Depression families spent nothing because they understood that seeds, properly kept, are not a consumable. They are a renewable resource that multiplies itself every season. Number 2. The Ice Cave. In regions where winter temperatures dropped reliably below freezing, Depression families built ice caves to extend their cold storage through summer. A location was selected on a north-facing slope, protected from direct sun. A pit was dug several feet deep and lined with straw for insulation. In late winter, blocks of ice were cut from frozen ponds and packed into the pit, layered heavily with straw between each block to slow melting. The entrance was sealed with a tight-fitting insulated door. Inside, temperatures remained below 40 degrees from February through late July or early August, providing genuine refrigeration for 7 to 8 months of the year, at no ongoing cost beyond the initial construction. A family who built one in 1931 was still using it in 1939. Modern households pay electricity costs every month for a refrigerator that provides the same function continuously. Depression families built their version once. Number 1. The Whole System Mindset. Every trick on this list is real, verifiable, and still functional today. None of them require anything unavailable in a modern household. But none of them work in isolation, and that is what makes this number 1. Depression families did not apply individual clever tricks to isolated problems. They operated their entire household as a closed system in which outputs from one process became inputs to another. The ash from the fire went into soap and garden fertilizer. The soap fat came from the drippings jar built by cooking. The cooking liquid from vegetables became the broth. The broth bones fed the garden. The garden fed the family. The scraps from feeding the family became the next round of compost, vinegar, dye, and stock. The mindset is the most powerful thing on this list because it does not require any particular skill or material. It requires only a decision to look at every resource and ask what the next use is before placing it in the trash. Your great-grandmother did not call this sustainability. She called it common sense. The only reason it feels unusual today is that an entire industry was built between then and now to sell you replacements for things she would have made herself. Start with one thing. Save the cooking water from your next pot of vegetables. Use it as the base for the following night's soup. That one decision is the beginning of the same system that kept American families alive through the worst decade this country has ever experienced. They did not survive because they had enough. They survived because they understood that enough was already there. These were not the habits of people who had given up on comfort. They were the habits of people who refused to give up on their families. 22 tricks. Each one still works. Each one costs less than whatever it replaces. And every single one of them was considered ordinary knowledge until prosperity made forgetting them feel safe. If you found value in any of these, subscribe and check the next video. The Depression generation left behind more than survival tips. They left behind a way of thinking about resources that no one has been able to improve on since. Your great-grandmother knew. Now you do too.